Shalom, shalom, peace, peace. This is Jadiel from the Fourth Angels Learning Center. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. Now, today we're going to be concluding our study, our four-part series on the everlasting covenant. Now, before we go into it, I want to remind everybody that if you haven't seen the other covenant videos first, please go back and check those out. They're very important for this particular study. Okay, so we're going to be discussing how the everlasting covenant transitioned from Mount Sinai to what we call the New Testament, or now, basically. We went over how the everlasting covenant, the elements revealed from Scripture, the evidence shows that this everlasting covenant has been established with man in the very beginning, with Adam. And that Adam broke the everlasting covenant. And as we read in Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah says that those who break the everlasting covenant, break his commandments, and change his ordinances is what brings the curse on the earth. And we saw that this attribute was first revealed in the breaking of the commandments, breaking of the covenant in Genesis when Adam broke the commandment and ate the fruit. And we saw the curse that went on the whole earth because of him specifically, his actions. And the prophet Isaiah says that the inhabitants of the earth has defiled the earth, and the earth languished because of the inhabitants of it. So we saw how Yah tried to reestablish this covenant, but he added addendums. We covered all of those addendums that he added, and then when we got to the patriarch Noah, we saw that Noah was also, he was reestablishing the covenant with Noah, the same everlasting covenant with Noah, with the addendum that he gave to Adam, which was the addendum or the addition of sacrifices. We then saw further down in history that he gave this covenant to Abraham, and that Abraham became basically like the poster child of the everlasting covenant, and that the children of Abraham would always remember Abraham because of the specific addendums or covenants that he made with Abraham, such as circumcision as a reminder, as a token. Just as the sacrificial system was added, circumcision was added. Go check that video out. You'll see how. We saw that also later on in regards to David. We saw Moses. We saw that there was a whole plethora of additions to this everlasting covenant. It did not stop being the Abrahamic covenant. That video makes it very clear. The covenant from Abraham is still transitioning over to the children of Israel, but there was additions. And the book of Galatians tells us that these additions were established because of transgression, not because this is the way that Yah intended it to be. Because of transgression, Yah had to add certain covenants in order to reestablish the belief of his people, which we see that he's done with King David. He's made covenants with King David, and now all of these covenants have to be fulfilled and can be completed before this everlasting covenant is restored. So the everlasting covenant is a promise that as long as you are abiding in him, he will abide with you. And not only will he abide with you, but he will give you and restore the covenant of what he gave to Adam, which was the inheritance of the whole earth, the blessing of everlasting life, immortality, as Adam had, dominion, rulership, being kings and priests. So all of these promises that belong to Messiah, that belong to Abraham, that belong to Adam, is being broken down and transferred as Yah's trying to restore each generation. But because of transgression, he adds these different elements, these new covenants, which we break down in those videos. So now we broke down that Moses was the final element of what we call the Old Testament. the final element within the prophets that existed, in which Yah says, you transgressed this covenant, and now I have to reestablish this Abrahamic covenant again. But now we got to the point prophetically in which not only is Yah going to reestablish this covenant as he's done throughout generations, but he's also going to fulfill certain covenants that he's established throughout the years with the patriarchs, with our forefathers. He's fulfilling those things, which we are here in the New Testament. So before we get started, I want to remind you guys, if we have been a blessing to you guys, we ask that you consider to bless the Fourth Angels Learning Center. Consider to bless us with your donations, with your prayers, with your suggestions and topics of things that you want to see. And we will be elated to create videos or to respond, have a dialogue back and forth. Many questions, many videos are actually developed because of questions that people have asked, conversations that we have been involved in, and problems, issues of understanding that people have issues, grasping. So we make these studies to make it clear and simple for people to take this material and go back and study on their own. So if you desire to bless us, you can go to 4alc.com. You can also bless us on Cash App, which is $4ALC bless. That's 4ALCBLESS, and we appreciate all the support that comes in. It's definitely a blessing. So with that being said, we're going to go to what people call the New Testament. Now, I noticed that there's been many issues with what he's going to reestablish and why. And I want to first go to that in the book of Jeremiah. The reason why I'm going to go to the book of Jeremiah before I go to the New Testament is because everything in the New Testament is based off of the prophets and the Torah. So if you don't know how to find it in the Old Testament, then it's not really in the New Testament. The New Testament doesn't exist without the Torah and the prophets. It's one of the biggest problems that we have understanding the covenants. It's one of the biggest problems we understand on this. We have understanding the law is disconnecting the Old Testament from the so-called New Testament. We need to understand that throughout history, Yah has been creating new testaments or new covenants with his people as he reestablished the everlasting covenant. I don't want to call it old. If I call it old, it has to have a proper context, which we're going to talk about today. So Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 25, and we're going to read verse 25 to 35. Just listen to what he's saying, right? He says, for I have satisfied the weary soul. I have replenished every sorrowful soul. Upon this I awaked and beheld, and my sleep was sweet unto me. It says, behold, the days come, saith Yah, that I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and with the seed of beast. What is this referring to? He's talking about scattering his people all over the world. And it says here in verse 28, it shall come to pass, like as have I watched over them, to pluck up and to break down and to throw down and to destroy and to afflict, so will I watch over them to build and to plant, saith Yahuwah. So just like I've chastised and punished my people, so will I also build them up and restore them, my people as well. So he's given them understanding of his fatherhood. I have to do this because of your rebellion, but I'm going to do this in a way in which I can restore you back. It says, in those days, they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten the sour grape and the children's teeth are set on edge, but everyone shall die of his own iniquity. Every man that eats the sour grape, his teeth shall be set on edge. So he's separating the elements. He's going to scatter his people and then he's going to build them back. But this time, when he builds back his people, it's not going to be something in which how the majority of his people were idolaters, and then now Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, and Jeremiah have to deal with Babylon coming and burning down their whole life, basically in Jerusalem. He's saying that there's going to be a separation. Everybody's not going to be put in captivity together. Everybody's not going to be dealt with together. Everyone is going to be dealt with individually because they're scattered. They're no longer a nation. So this is definitely not talking about when they came back from Babylon. Okay. When they came back from Babylon, they came back from Babylon as a nation, and they came back as a nation and there was still some rebellion going on. But Yah had to fulfill certain promises, especially the coming of Messiah. So this is definitely an indicator showing us this is way further than the time of Babylon. It's way further than the time that they came back from Babylon or from the kingdom of Persia. All right. So it says here, behold, the days come, again, continuously referencing the future. It says, saith Yah, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they broke, although I was a husband unto them, saith Yah. Meaning that I was a husband to them, and then they kind of separated our relationship. It says, but this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Yah. I will put my law in their inward parts and write in their hearts, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. They shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, so it's a specific teaching that he's referring to. He's not saying nobody's going to teach each other nothing. He's saying nobody's going to teach each other this particular saying. Know Yah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith Yah, for I will forgive their iniquity and I will remember their sin no more. What do you mean, know Yah? This is referring to the Messiah. This is referring to the restoration and the forgiveness that Messiah is going to execute for his people. That when Messiah dies and resurrects and takes the punishment for our iniquity, that Yah will remember our sins no more. He will forgive our iniquity for his son's sake. And then we're going to have access to know Yah intimately. This word know, I believe, is the Hebrew word yada, which is the same word used for intimate relations, between a husband and wife. Let me show you. No, it's yada, right? It's the same one that says, and Cain and Abel and Adam knew his wife and bare his son. It's the same word. It's talking about intimacy. Nobody's going to have to tell somebody to know who Yah is, because they will know who Yah is, because their iniquities will be forgiven and their sins won't be remembered. You see that? As the prophet Isaiah talks about the suffering servant bearing our stripes and taking our iniquity, being punished for our iniquity, talking about the future. So this covenant is not going to be like the covenant in the time of Mount Sinai. Very specific. It's not going to be like the time that I brought your people out of Egypt. Where does he say that? It says here, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand out of the land of Egypt, which is a covenant that they broke also. Okay, so this is gonna be very direct and very individual. Everybody that's involved with me is not gonna have to be taught to know Yah. What's the difference? The difference is that the children of Israel at Mount Sinai, when they created and established the nation of Israel, it was a mixture. There were people that did not know Yah. There's people that didn't care. There's people that cursed Yah. There's people that it didn't matter, because there was a fulfillment of a covenant that Yah made with Abraham that had to be established. This establishment was the establishment of his seed as a nation, the children of Abraham as a nation. So he did it to fulfill his promise, but also to give them an opportunity to enter into a real covenant. Nobody had to tell Moses to know Yah. Nobody had to tell Caleb to know Yah. Matter of fact, Caleb has a testimony saying that he gave Yah his whole heart. Nobody had to teach him that at all. Nobody, not even Moses. After he knew that, nobody had to teach Caleb that. Nobody had to teach Joshua that. Nobody had to teach the prophets that. But the people were intertwined with other seed of Abraham during this establishment of a nation, that when the majority sinned, Yah had to bring the whole nation into captivity. The whole nation, multiple times, under the oppression of the Philistines, under the oppression of the Assyrians, under the oppression of Babylon, under the oppression. So this is what was going on because of the rebellion of the nation, the established nation. But look at what he said he's going to do. He said it's going to be different. Yah's people is going to be scattered. Verse 28 is going to be scattered, but Yah is going to watch over them and he's going to build them up and plant them. And what else is going to happen? It says, everyone shall die for their own iniquity. Every man that eats a sour grape, his teeth shall be set on edge. So it's like, no, everybody that does the wrong thing is going to be punished. If you eat the sour grape, then your teeth will be messed up by that grape. Nobody else's teeth. Then he says, I'm going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. While they're scattered, remember, while they're scattered. When we get to the New Testament, I want you guys to understand, when we get to the New Testament, they're still somewhat a nation being oppressed by the nation of Rome. So they're not scattered at that time during the time of Messiah. It's after the time of Messiah that they become scattered again because of persecution and also because of sin, because of rebellion. Jerusalem gets burned down again in 70 AD. So this is very important that we understand this covenant, right? Because we're not talking about just the time of Messiah. We're talking about us. We're talking about right now while we're scattered. This covenant applies to us while we're scattered, not to them. They didn't get scattered to the all over the nations. They didn't get scattered like seed. You know what they got? They got collectively brought into captivity. All of the 10 tribes went into Assyria. Then Judah went into Babylon. When Babylon took over Assyria, then Judah was put into captivity. And guess what? They were with the 10 tribes in Babylon, in the empire of Babylon. And then Judah left, came back to Jerusalem. You see, so everything that they did as a whole. They were brought into captivity together. They were set free together. But then there's this time after Messiah died in which they were sown like a seed to the four corners. Not migrated. They didn't migrate to Germany and Russia and Poland. They didn't migrate. They were scattered. So there's a difference there. Okay, so when we're looking at this new covenant, we have to understand this for us, not just look in the New Testament and be like, oh, wow, look at this. This is the New Testament. No, we have to understand this for us as well. So let's continue to look at this. It's not the same type of covenant. And if you go back to the video that we made, we showed that the covenant at Mount Sinai was slightly different. It was different from the covenant that was given to Abraham. These things that were given at Mount Sinai were added alongside the covenant given to Abraham. So the covenant that he's restoring is not a covenant based off of Mount Sinai, and we're gonna establish that when we look through the scriptures. So remember, he's not establishing this new covenant is not an establishment of the Mount Sinai covenant. Go back to that video to see that covenant was surrounded by different added elements because of transgression. He added a priesthood because of transgression. He added a sacrificial system, like a system, because of transgression. And he added a restriction to come into the presence of Yah in the temple because of transgression. These elements Yah did not desire to establish originally. So now we see that Yah is coming into a new covenant, to establish a new covenant, not like that one, because they broke that covenant and Yah had to give them the Levitical priesthood, the temple service, and the sacrificial system. He had to give them these three elements, which restricted them to come into the presence of Yah. Now he's saying, nobody's going to have to tell you to know me. Everybody's going to be like the priests. Everybody's going to know me, right? So let's continue to look at this, right? Jeremiah chapter 31. Where are we? Jeremiah chapter 21, right? There's going to be a forgiveness of iniquity, a remembering of sin no more. And then in verse 35, thus saith Yahuwah, which gives the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and the stars for a light by night, which divides the sea and waves and roar. Yahuwah of hosts is his name. So he's talking about him definitely going to establish this covenant in the future. So as he's individually getting involved with different people at this time, during the time of Jeremiah, Ezra, prophet Ezra, the governor Nehemiah, which was very instrumental in helping all Israel maintain their purity and not break the Shabbat, which we see in Nehemiah chapter 9, the reading of the Torah that Ezra did in Nehemiah chapter 8. There's so many people that has dedicated their lives back to Yah. They knew Yah. They knew him. They walked before him. They had their iniquities and their sins removed because they had that relationship with him. Yah promised and blessed them. But not as a majority. As a majority, there was a rebellion, there was things, but Yah had already promised through the prophet Daniel that the Messiah had to come to a rebuilt city. He had to come. Let's go to that. Let's go to Daniel before we're going to go to the New Testament to start to see the elements that was added at Mount Sinai being removed. Daniel chapter 9. If we go to Daniel chapter 9, look at what it says down here. It says here in verse 24. Now, this is prophetic, so I'm not going to break down every single element in this video. It says 70 weeks are determined upon the people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins. It says to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in the everlasting righteousness, the covenant, everlasting covenant, to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks. Now, this is the commandment that was given to Israel by Artaxerxes to go rebuild Jerusalem. So it was from the time that they were set free from Babylon during the time of Persia, all the way to the time of Messiah. They're supposed to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah. And it says, even the street shall be built and the wall. Remember, Nehemiah went back to Jerusalem because they didn't build the wall. They weren't building the wall properly. And then it says that after 62 weeks or 62 weeks, shall the Messiah be cut off. So there's this coming of the Messiah, rebuilding of Jerusalem, and the wall and the street has to be there when Messiah comes. When Messiah comes, these things have to be there. And then it says, and the people and the prince shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So now the sanctuary is going to be destroyed, which we know in 70 AD it was. Look down here in verse 27. I want to focus on this part. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. I'm not going to go into that. And it says, and in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifices and the offerings to stop. So the Messiah is going to cause the sacrifice and the offerings to stop for the overspreading of abominations, and he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So if you don't understand most of these things, at least you understand this statement here. That they were given a command to restore, to build Jerusalem to the time that Messiah, the Prince, came. Then the Messiah was going to be cut off or killed, but not for himself. And it says, the people of the Prince shall come and shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Yes, the Jews' rebellion is what caused this destruction and this desolation. It says that the Messiah is going to confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifices and the offerings to stop. This is when he was cut off. This is when he died. While he was confirming this new covenant with his people, he was killed, and the veil in the temple ripped, showing that the temple was now irrelevant, meaning like this type was now being set aside. Not only was the temple, but if the veil in the temple was ripped, what's the purpose of a priest? Everybody can see directly into the most holy now. They can see clearly that there's no ark of the covenant there. So the temple, the altar was ripped, no sacrifices, just as Messiah said, your house has been left to you desolate. It was desolate. After a little bit ways after that, we have what? We have 70 AD, where the Romans burned down Jerusalem. Yah told his people to go into the mountains through Messiah in Matthew chapter 24. And his people were scattered. The righteous people were scattered, as well as the rebellious Israelites were scattered. Remember, there were those who followed Messiah that he told to go to the mountains. So they were scattered, and they left because of persecution, and they were scattered already because their own people was persecuting them. And then Israel as a whole, as a rebellious whole, was scattered at the burning down of Jerusalem. So this new covenant is definitely necessary. But let's get a little bit more elements so we could understand this covenant that we're actually a part of now, because it doesn't negate every single instruction just because Moses gave it. It negates the things that were added specifically because of transgression. Okay? Not every instruction that was given because of transgression. So let's continue to go to this now. Now we're going to show the difference of this covenant. Let's go to the book of Hebrews. I'm trying to think. This is going to be pretty heavy, so I'm going to try to move pretty quick, right? So look at what Hebrews chapter 7 speaks on pertaining to the Levitical priesthood. He's talking to the Hebrews in this book. This book was to the Hebrews, so that way they can understand the meaning of what the prophets in the Torah was talking about. It says, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not after the order of Aaron? Many people are still emphasizing that the order of Aaron still remains. But he's saying, why would there be another order if the order of Aaron is still around, is still relevant? You see, it says, for the priesthood being changed, therefore was made a necessity a change of the law. What law? The law that the priest had to perform. If the Messiah was the sacrifice, there's no need for a sacrifice. There's no need for a sacrifice, and the Messiah is the high priest. Why is there a need for a priesthood to intercede when we have a high priest? Why do we need other high priests? Why do we need the order of Aaron? The order of Aaron were high priests, not just regular priests. The Levites were something different, but the sons of Aaron were high priests. They were the intercessors for Israel. But now we have an intercessor changing these things. Why? Because these things were added because of transgression. So when Messiah died and iniquity was removed, right? Like we read in Daniel chapter 9, reconciliation for iniquity was made. Was there a need for this particular priesthood if it was added because of iniquity, because of transgression? Look at what it says here. It says, for he of whom these things are spoken pertain to another tribe. So all these things pertaining to Messiah being our priest, but the priesthood was not talked about. Messiah wasn't a part of this priesthood. It says, of which no man gave attendance at the altar. Nobody in the tribe of Judah was working at the altar. Messiah is from the tribe of Judah. Look at what it says in verse 14. For it is evident that our master sprang out of Judah, of which tribe Moses did not speak about concerning the priesthood. So if Messiah was from the priesthood, was from the tribe of Judah, and he was told in Psalms chapter 110 that he's a priest after the order of Melchizedek, and that the order of Melchizedek existed, which we see in Genesis chapter 14. Melchizedek met with Abraham. Why in the world is there a need for this order of Aaron? If there was already an order of Melchizedek, and if that order is going to be established, the order of Aaron, if you go back to the video, the order of Aaron was established because of sin. So when sin and iniquity was reconciled for, this priesthood was changed, and therefore the laws pertaining to that priesthood changed, and therefore we now have a high priest in which Moses spoke nothing about. Moses did not break down any rules about the Melchizedek priesthood. He broke down the Levitical priesthood. Let's continue. It says, as it yet far more evident, for after that similitude of Melchizedek, there arise another priest. So we see that this priesthood could not accomplish what it was set out to do. It was set out earthly because of sin. Yah initially wanted a kingdom of priests. Let's look at that scripture. Exodus chapter 19. We're going to look at verse 6. Yah says, you shall be a kingdom of priests, not one tribe, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak unto the children of Israel. So he wanted the whole children of Israel to be a kingdom of priests. He didn't want just the tribe of Levi to be priests. But why did the tribe of Levi become priests? Well, if you read the book of Exodus, you'll see that when they made the golden calf and Moses said, who's on Yah's side? Only the Levites stood up confidently that they were on Yah's side. Unfortunately, because of that, Yah honored them and gave them and replaced the children of the firstborn of every tribe that was supposed to serve Yah as priests, every tribe. He replaced them in Numbers chapter 2 with the Levites. And the Levites replaced the firstborn, meaning that the firstborn was supposed to be priests of every tribe, not just the tribe of Levi. So with that being said, we can clearly see in verse 11, Hebrews chapter 7 says, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priests, which under it the people received the law, what further need was there of another priest that should rise after the order of Melchizedek? Why? Because it was not meant to be forever. It was not meant to be forever. But which one was meant to be forever? Let's go to Psalms chapter 110. Psalms chapter 110. Look at what it says here in verse 4. It says, Yah has sworn, and I will not repent. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. What do you mean? There's an order of Melchizedek? Yes. We even see that this king here that met with Abraham, this king of Salem, also was after the order of Melchizedek. Verse 18 of Genesis 14, Melchizedek, king of Salem. There's a place called Salem, which many people refer to as Jerusalem. So Melchizedek was king of Jerusalem. He brought bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High Elohim. Was he an Israelite? No. He's actually blessing Abraham right here. So the Melchizedek priesthood was forever. You think that this person was a Melchizedek priest before the order of Melchizedek priests? There's people that were Melchizedek priests before Messiah? Absolutely not. So all these people are involved in the Melchizedek priesthood because of their belief, because of their relationship with Yah, because of their covenant with Yah. They are kings and priests. Look at this. This guy's a king and he's a priest. This is this is exactly the same promise that is given to us, that we will become kings and priests. Let's go to this. There's so much information to cover on this aspect here. First Peter chapter 2. Is it chapter 2? Yes. Verse 9, it says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. A royal priesthood, royal meaning kingdom, kingly priests, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So before Levi, right, Yah wanted a kingdom of priests. That's what he said in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6. Because of the golden calf and because of transgression, Yah established Levi to replace the original way he wanted his people to be priests and serve him. So they replaced it. Now, there was a removal of sin and iniquity, a reestablishing of the covenant, and now we're back to Melchizedek priesthood. Okay? Levi priests won't come back at the same time as Melchizedek priesthood. That doesn't make sense. Messiah is the high priest. If Levi has to be priest, then Messiah cannot be priest, which we read in Hebrews chapter 7. It says Moses did not speak about Judah being priests. Okay, so Moses said Judah cannot be priests. So you can't have a Levitical priest and Messiah as priests, because Messiah is from the tribe of Judah. Let's continue to look at these things that from Mount Sinai that was not given into this covenant, right? So we just established the priesthood of Levi was not reestablished in this new covenant. One, Yah's people is scattered. So if Yah's people is scattered, nobody is going to no temple. Two, when Messiah died, that temple veil ripped. Ain't nobody trying to go to no earthly temple, no carnal temple made with man's hands, when Messiah is telling us, okay, it's time now, just as I promised before, it's time now to establish my original thought, which is to have a people, a kingdom of priests. Let's continue to look at it. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 8 now. So we were in Hebrews 7. Let's look at Hebrews 8. They're going to continuously talk about this covenant, especially the elements that were a part of the covenant at Mount Sinai. It says, now of these things which we've spoken of, this is the sum, which means this is the conclusion. It says, we have a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of majesty on high. So he's talking about the priesthood in Hebrews chapter 7, and then he gets to Hebrews chapter 8, and he says, okay, guys, this is the crux of the matter. The reason why I'm saying all this stuff about the Levitical priesthood and the order of Melchizedek is because now I'm telling you that we have a high priest that sits on the right hand of the throne of the majesty on high. Verse 2, a minister of the sanctuary and the true tabernacle. That means that there's a true tabernacle, which Yah pitches and not man. This is what has to happen. This is based off of scripture. This is based off of prophecy. Let's look at this, right? So who has to build the temple? It is a son of David. Messiah is the son of David. So he was told to build a temple. Solomon built the temple, and you know what he says? He says, are you really going to dwell in this temple? So here in Hebrews chapter 8, verse 2, we have a true tabernacle, which Yah pitched and not man. Every high priest is ordained to offer offerings and sacrifices. Wherefore, it is necessary that this man also has something to offer. Look what it says. For if he was on earth, he would not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offers offerings according to the law. What is he referring to? The priests, before they interceded for Israel, the priests had to offer offerings for themselves and for their household. It was a rule. You had to offer sacrifices for yourself. Messiah, if he was a priest on earth, a Levitical priest, he would have to offer offerings for himself. That's what it's saying here. It says, who serve unto the example of the shadow of heavenly things, not the actual things, the example, shadow. It says, as Moses was admonished of Elohim when he was about to make the tabernacle, he says, foresee. He says, say if you make all these things according to the pattern that I show you. So in Exodus chapter 25, he goes up the mountain and he shows them a pattern. And he says, make everything according to the way that I'm telling you. No, there's no real goats and lambs up there. No, there's no real cloth and pictures of angels. There's real angels up there. There's no golden cherubims up there, statues. No, there's no ark called a mercy seat. No, there's a throne of Yah. Yah is on a throne. You see, so there's a pattern, a shadow, a resemblance of these things, not the real thing. So look at what it says. The priesthood had to offer offerings. So you have the offerings and you have the priesthood and you have the tabernacle, like we said before. These are the elements that was added in Exodus because of the sins of the children of Israel. These were not things that he was intending to make. When he told them to make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, we'll come back here. Exodus chapter 25. Let's see, where is it? Exodus chapter 25. Oh, I'm in Genesis. Exodus chapter 25. Look at what he says here. Verse 8, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. According to all that I show you after the pattern of the tabernacle, the pattern of the tabernacle. You see that? So there was a true tabernacle that was being shown to Moses that he had to make a resemblance of. This is the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall you make. But why did he say, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them? Because in Exodus chapter 20, 5 chapters before, what did they do when Yah tried to speak to them face to face? Verse 18, it says, all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. When the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. They said to Moses, you speak with us and we will hear, but don't let Elohim speak with us lest we die. Moses tried to help them out. He says, Moses said unto the people, fear not, for Elohim is come to prove you that his fear may be before your eyes and that you sin not. Yah is trying to remove their sins. They're trying to remove themselves. They removed and stood afar off. So they're moving away from Yah. You know what Yah says in Exodus 25? Make me a sanctuary so I can dwell among them. Look how merciful he is to us. We're running away from him and he's trying to use different methods just to dwell with us. It's because of our sin. It's because of our disconnection between us and him, our iniquity, that these things were given to us, the Levitical priesthood, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, the sacrifices. Those things were given to us because of sin, to help us be brought back into a relationship with him. Let's go back. Hebrews chapter 8. Let's continue. Look at what it says in verse 7. It says, for if the first had been faultless, then should there be no place for a second. Is he saying that the first covenant had a fault in it? Let's look at the next verse. It says, finding fault with them. They were the issue. Just as we read in Jeremiah 31, it says, I'm going to make a new covenant with them, not like the covenant that I made with them when I took them out of Egypt, the one that they broke. You see that? The covenant that they broke. Here is reiterating that. Moses' covenant wasn't a problem. It was to help them. It was supposed to help them. It was supposed to help us. But Yah found fault with them, saying, behold, the days come that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. We just read that. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand and led them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith Yahuwah. This, the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Yah, I will put my laws into their mind, write them in their hearts, and I will be to them an Elohim, and they shall be to me a people. And it talks about them not teaching each other, just like we read in Jeremiah 31. They shall not teach every man his neighbor, every man his brother, saying, know Yah, for all shall know me from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful unto their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. And then he says, in that he says, a new anew. So because of this, he's saying anew. He have also made the first old. So he's talking about the first elements. The whole chapter is talking specifically about the sanctuary, about the priests, right? So look at this, the priesthood, the sanctuary, and the sacrifices. So when we're looking at what law it's talking about, or what covenant it's talking about, it's not talking about the everlasting covenant, nor is it talking about all the instructions that was given. It was talking specifically about the covenant of Levi with the priesthood, the covenant of Levi with the tabernacle, the covenant with Levi with the sacrificial system of intercession. That was waxing old. It was being removed so that way we can go intimately before Yah. That's what was vanishing away. The addendum, the added covenant that was given to them at Mount Sinai. Now remember, Yah gave the sacrificial system before Mount Sinai, which is where we're going to go now. If you go to Hebrews chapter 9 now, it continues to talk about the same elements of the law from Mount Sinai. It says the first covenant had ordinances and divine service in a worldly sanctuary. So you see, they're talking very specifically about what aspects of that covenant is waxing old or vanishing away. It says, for there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlesticks, the temple, the table of showbread, and it was called the sanctuary. After the second veil, it was the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. That's where the Ark of the Covenant was. It says there was a golden censer in there. There was an ark that had gold. It was covered with gold. There was a golden pot that had manna in it, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant, which is the Ten Commandments on the tables of stone. So this description, cherubims of glory shadowing the mercy seat, which we cannot now speak particularly. It says, now these things were ordained. It says the priest went always into the first tabernacle to accomplish the service of Yah. Into the second, they did not go, but the high priest went once a year. What is this referring to? Leviticus 16 is talking about the Day of Atonement. So the high priest went once a year into the most holy place, not without blood. And he offered it for himself. This is what it was talking about, why Messiah couldn't be a priest on earth, because he offered it for himself. So when Messiah came on earth, it's now time for another priesthood. It's now time for a reestablishing of the Melchizedek priesthood on earth, which we see in 2 Peter. So this is why he couldn't be a Levitical priesthood. This is why Levitical priesthood has to step aside in order to establish the original intent of Yah's priesthood on this earth, which is the order of Melchizedek. He had to offer it for himself for the errors of the people. And it says the set apart spirit signifying that the way into the most holy was not yet made manifest while the first tabernacle was yet standing. So while the first tabernacle was yet standing, it wasn't revealed fully to all the people how to get to the throne of Yah. As we continue to read in Hebrews, we're going to see that in the book of Hebrews, it's going to express to us what experience we have now. It says that this tabernacle that was standing, it says it was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts or offerings and sacrifices that could not make him that did these service perfect, as pertaining to the conscience. So this is very important. Let's skip down a little bit. Verse 13, it says, for if the blood of bulls and goats and ashes of the heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctified and purified the flesh by faith, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal spirit offered himself without spot to Elohim, purge our conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. So if that purged, if we believed in the past in those earthly elements, how much more is Messiah's death? So you see, there's no necessity to reestablish the red heifer. This verse here in verse 13, this is what they took the red heifer and they sacrificed it and offered it unto Yah. And they took the ashes and they put it in a bowl outside of the camp. And those ashes was supposed to be sprinkled on them, right? The ashes of the heifer was supposed to be sprinkled on people that was unclean in order to purify them ritually. So now we have people in Israel raising red heifers in order to rebuild the temple to do this. But look at what it says here. If the ashes of the heifer was able to clean the unclean, how much more is the blood of Messiah able to purge your conscience? Why would we go back to a red heifer if we have more? So again, there's no emphasis on don't be partial with your brother, or having just weights and balances, doing business properly. Those commandments are not done away with. What is being affected by the death and resurrection of Messiah is the removal of the priesthood, the tabernacle, and the need of these sacrifices for cleansing, for restoration, for protection. We have the blood of Messiah. So he is our mediator also of the new covenant, which Yah has been trying to establish since after Adam. It says that by the means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first covenant, the transgressions that were under the first covenant, they which were called might receive the promise of the inheritance, of eternal inheritance. So Messiah is fulfilling the things that pertain to the transgressions that were under the first covenant. And all these instructions, the priesthood, the sanctuary, the sacrificial system, were given because of the transgressions. So Yah is trying to purify his people with the real things that he wanted to actually do, which was to save them and deliver them from their iniquities and allow all of his people to be a kingdom of priests and kings and to walk in holiness and in purity. So let's see this. I'm trying to make sure that we're looking at these things. So it says, if therefore, verse 23 of Hebrews 9, if it was therefore necessary that the patterns of things of heaven should be purified with blood, but the heavenly things have to be purified by better sacrifices. For Messiah is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are figures of the true, but into the heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of Elohim for us. Not yet for that he should offer himself often. He's not going to offer himself often. He's not constantly spilling his blood over and over again, just as they had to do for all the sacrifices. But as the high priest enters into the holy place every year with blood as offers, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, right? If this was necessary all the time, then he would be doing it from the very beginning over and over again. But look at what it says here. But now once in the end of the world, which he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So now look at what it says, the end of the world. This is an indicator that whatever covenant this is establishing, all the things that all the elements he's removing, all the elements he's fulfilling and completing is going to create a covenant, a new covenant that's going to be established for the end of the world. The death of Messiah is to establish this covenant. Right here, it says, now once in the end of the world. So even though the end of the world it seemed like a long time period to us, it's not really a long time period to Yah. Read what Peter says about why Yah gives us some time, is to see how much people he can deliver and save. It says, as it is appointed unto men to die once, but after this, the judgment. So Messiah once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear for the second time without sin unto salvation. You see that? Those who those who look for him. Was this covenant given to others? Were others looking for him? Absolutely. Did he accomplish this specific act during those times? No, but they believed it by faith. So they were experiencing the deliverance as they walked in righteousness for what Yahushua was going to do in the future at this time when Messiah came. So now for us, we are continuing this covenant, this new covenant, without those other elements because Messiah has already come to establish and fulfill those elements that were added because of transgression. Chapter 10, again, reiterating. It says, for the law having a shadow of good things to come and not the very image of the thing. So the sacrificial system, the priesthood, and the tabernacle were not the very image of the reality. It was shadows, they were figures. It says they can never, with those sacrifices that they offered every year on the Day of Atonement, continually make the comer unto perfect. They could not do it. Every time they had the Day of Atonement, it was to remember that their sins needed to be cleansed. Now, that still reminds us today, when Day of Atonement comes around, we still have to understand that the Messiah is interceding for us in the true tabernacle, cleansing his people for real. He has always been cleansing his people, but the earthly demonstration of that cleansing of the tabernacle was just a demonstration of what Yahushua was going to do for us. It wasn't the very actual things. So if we now have the very actual things, why is there a necessity to rebuild another earthly temple, to do more earthly Levitical priesthood services, and to kill more earthly goats when Messiah is the goat, the sin offering? It says, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. It's not possible. It says, wherefore, when he comes into the world, he says, sacrifices and offering you would not, but a body has you prepared me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sins, you had no pleasure. This is David speaking in Psalms chapter 40. This is what the prophets understood. Then said I, lo, I come in the volume of the book, for it is written of me to do your will, O Elohim. Now, so he says, I come in the volume of the book. He's speaking of the Torah, the books of Moses. He says it is written because of me. Many people are saying, oh, David is talking about himself. Is the book of Moses talking about David? Did the book of Moses, the volume of the book, was written about David? Anyway, it's talking about Messiah. And he says here in verse 8, it says above, when he said, sacrifices and offerings and burnt offerings and offering for sin, you would not, neither had pleasure in it, which are offered by the law, by the instructions. Then said he, lo, I come to do your will, O Elohim. He takes away the first to establish the second. Now, if you know if you've been following the series, you'll notice that there's been many covenants, but he's specifically talking about the sacrificial Levitical priesthood, sacrificial system, and temple service. It says, by which we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Yahushua Messiah once and for all. Once and for all. So in verse 14, it says, for by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. Forever he perfected them. He's interceding forever because he's a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. It says here in verse 16, this is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, and I will put my laws in their hearts, and in their minds will I write them, and all their sins and iniquities will I remember no more. Now where remission is, there is no more offering for sin. So now that I removed, remission means remove. So now where I removed your sins, there's no need for offering. I removed your sin. So now that there's no sin, right? If you walk in righteousness, I removed it. But if you sin, we have an advocate with the Father. That's what John says in First John chapter 2. So let's talk about this boldness, right? Remember, the tabernacle of heaven is the new recognition, right? The new approach. Before we approach this earthly place, now Yah wants us to approach him directly so nobody could tell anybody else, you know me, know Yah. You may do that initially, but once they know him, you don't ever have to teach nobody to know him. You just got to teach everybody the details, right? That's why Yah has teachers and prophets and apostles to teach the details. Okay, you don't understand what day the Shabbat is, but you can still read and accept the Messiah and the sacrifice and the death and the resurrection and believe, and you can still receive those things as the nations did in the book of Acts. But in the book of Acts also, they were studying to understand all of the elements that represent righteousness, all the elements that represents Yah's character on this earth, which is located in the Torah and in the statutes and judgments. So it says, having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Messiah. So now he's telling us to have boldness to enter into the holiest. Remember, no one could have entered that holiest except for the high priest once a year. Now we're being told to have boldness to enter into there. It says, by a new and living way which we have by which he had consecrated for us through the veil, which I is to say his flesh. So now the veil is showing you the figures now. The veil that separated us from the Ark of the Covenant that the priests only went through once a year. Now that we are a kingdom of priests, we can go through the veil of Messiah anytime with boldness. It says, now we have a high priest over the house of Elohim. Let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith. Let our hearts be sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised these things to us. Let's consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking one another, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. So we're still gathering together. Remember, this whole chapter is talking about the covenants and talking about the Day of Atonement. It says, don't neglect the times to gather together. It's not saying don't, whenever somebody calls an assembly, yeah, oh, this guy's having a Bible study. Oh, we can't neglect the gathering. Let's go to the Bible study. We have to. No. What were they neglecting? When you ask people, look at what it says. Don't forsake the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. So you see the last days coming. Don't forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as many people do. You see a lot of people, they want to start their cliques. They want to start their groups. They want to only go to this group or go to that group, which is fine. It depends on the group. If there's a group that's talking crap and falsehood, then you need to make sure that you are protecting your mind and the mind of your family. But you have to understand scripture as well. So, but if you find a group in which you're studying and you're diving deep into and all these things, then you don't forsake the times that you gather together, because the day is approaching, it says. We need to build each other up because the end is here. The Messiah's death was a signal of the end. And then he continuously gave us more signals to understand that we're in the end, you know. So this is basically understanding this New Testament idea. New Testament is not an aspect of removing the statutes and judgments. The New Testament is an aspect of removing those things which were added because of transgression. Why was the tabernacle and the priesthood added because of transgression? Well, they needed to understand how they were going to receive redemption. The Day of Atonement is the plan of redemption. If you look at the Day of Atonement, which is what Hebrews has been talking about this whole time, that once a year, going into the holiest of all once a year, that's only Day of Atonement. So when we're looking at the feasts and we're looking at the statutes and judgments and all these different things, you're going to see and recognize that all these things teach us how to get closer to Yah. But when you look at the tabernacle and the sacrifices and the priesthood, there are visual object lessons for us to build our faith on, to understand what we believe. And those things are being removed because those elements has to be applied to all of us, because this is how it was initially set up to be. We were supposed to be priests. Let's look at a few verses just to show that the apostles understood this reality. Let's go to Peter, right? First Peter chapter 2. So look at what it says here. Verse 4 of First Peter chapter 2. It says, to whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of Elohim and precious. You also, as lively stones, are built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, right? To offer up spiritual sacrifices. So a spiritual house or temple, a holy priesthood, spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Elohim by Yahushua Messiah. Do we understand? These three elements that we've been talking about this whole time is what's being removed in the reestablished New Testament or New Covenant, so to speak. Let's go further down. Verse 9, it says, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. It says, which in time past you were not a people, but you are now the people of Elohim, which had not obtained mercy, but now you have obtained mercy. Let's look at the book of Ephesians, chapter 2. He speaks in this language again further down. It says, now you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of Elohim. Look at what it says here. It says, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yahushua Messiah himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building is fitly framed together, grows into a holy temple in the master, in whom you are built together for a habitation of Elohim through the Ruach. What kind of sacrifice we offer? This is all over the New Testament. It says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto Elohim, which is your reasonable service. The services of the temple. You know, you are the temple. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Right? What does it say here? Verse 19. What? Do you not know that your body is the temple of the set apart spirit which is in you? Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 6 also. It says, for what agreement has the temple of Elohim with idols? For you are the temple of the living Elohim. And Elohim have said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. So this is what we're talking about when we entering into a new covenant. We're entering into a covenant without the elements that was established at Mount Sinai. It didn't say without the elements that was from the book of Moses. It says with not the same covenant that was made with Israel when they were taken out of Egypt, not the same covenant in regards to the covenant to Levi and the priesthood, not the same covenant about the tabernacle services or the sacrificial system. I will cause those things to cease. Daniel chapter 9:27. The Messiah will be cut off and he would cause the sacrifices and the offerings to cease. So we need to understand, you can't throw the whole book of Moses out. That don't make sense. The whole book of Moses is the instruction of righteousness. It's the scripture. can't throw the scriptures out. That don't make sense. But you can throw those elements that were added because of transgression. So the new covenant is simply to renew. Let's look at a couple of language and then we're going to close. There's some language in scripture that shows that new is not necessarily new. 2 Corinthians 3, right? Second Corinthians 3, verse 6, right? It says, who also have made us able ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the ruach. And the letter kills, but this ruach gives life. I have a study called The Letter of the Law versus the Spirit of Law, breaking this down. Both is there's a difference between the letter of the law only and the spirit of the law. The spirit of law incorporates what's written, and the letter of law is only what's written and not incorporating the spirit. And this is what it's referring to. But it says that we are ministers of the new covenant, and he's referring to this renewal, right? This newness of the same thing, right? So he says here, that the ministration, he says, if the ministration of condemnation was glory, how much more does the ministration of righteousness exceed in glory? So there's a difference in what was going on at Mount Sinai, which is what's mentioned here, and what was going on now. Every time they reference something being renewed, they have to go back to Moses and the experience with the Israelites with Moses, because that was when Yah's people was rebellious and they were not fully entering into a real covenant. Many died in the wilderness because they did not enter into that covenant. And look at what it says here. It says, not as Moses, which put the veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look to the end of that which was abolished. So they did not even understand the things that were put into play that were later on removed. They did not understand the Levitical priesthood. They didn't understand those things because they were not recognizing these things. And it says here in verse 14, their minds were blinded. Not that anything was wrong with it or that it was being hid from them. Their minds were blinded. They were looking right at it and did not understand. They were running away from it. Or they were treating the priesthood like it was the priesthood that was actually forgiving them and cleansing them. For until this day remained the same veil untaken away in the reading of the Old Testament. And the reason why it says Old Testament is because it's talking about the covenant, the ancient covenant, not the Old Testament. No, it's saying that they can't understand the ancient covenant, which the veil is done away in Messiah. What veil? The veil that blinds them. He's not saying that the law of Moses was done away with. He's saying that the veil, when reading the ancient covenant, was done away with in Messiah. It says, but even unto this day, when Moses is read, see that Moses is still read. People don't even read Moses today. It says, when Moses is read, the veil is upon their heart. They don't understand it. That's why they don't read it today. They interpreted it so incorrectly that it's not relevant to them. But it's only relevant when the veil is removed and your minds are no longer blinded. It says, nevertheless, when it shall turn to the master, the veil shall be taken away. The veil be taken away for what? So I can read the books of Moses. And when I read the books of Moses, look at what it says. Now the master is a spirit, and where the spirit of the master is, there's liberty. But we all, with open face, behold the glass, the glory of the master, which are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even by the same spirit. So the veil has to be removed so our minds won't be blinded when we're reading the ancient covenant. Let's look at Jeremiah. Jeremiah refers to the covenant during his time as old, right? Look at Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16. Look at what he says. It says, thus saith Yahuwah, stand in the ways and see and ask for the old paths. He's not saying ask for the paths that is done away with. He's saying ask for the ancient paths. And then it says, where is the good way? The good way is in the old stuff. Ask for the old path, where is the good way, and walk in it. And you shall have rest for your souls. But you say, we will not walk therein. Is Jeremiah saying that the old paths are old and done away with? No, he's just saying that they're ancient. So we need to understand that the word old is not referring to something that's done away with. As you can see, what we just read was that the veil was over their minds, blinding their minds. Right here, that their minds were blinded, that every time they read the ancient covenant that they could not understand because the veil which was done away with in Messiah was still over them. They did not understand Messiah. So when Moses was read, the veil was upon their heart. But when their heart shall turn to the master, the veil will be taken away when they read the books of Moses. And this is why Messiah says clearly, Moses spoke about me. So when you read it and you don't see Messiah and it's irrelevant now, that's how people start to toss out the law and the statutes and judgments. But that's not what Yah is saying. If you don't know if you're not reading the old ancient covenant, you're not going to understand Messiah, because Messiah says that the ancient covenant spoke about me. And the New Testament is breaking down the ancient covenant for the people who now newly believe. And they read Moses and they were reading the ancient covenant. Even in Acts 15, they were reading the Moses, they were reading the books of Moses every Shabbat. Let's go to that. Acts 15. Right here. It says, for Moses of old time, ancient times, have in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Shabbat. You see that? Every Shabbat, they're reading through the books of Moses. But with the true understanding, especially of Messiah, the veil is removed when they're reading these things. So today, when people toss out the books of Moses, it's because they don't have, the veil is not removed. They rather read something else other than the actual books that that Messiah actually wants to reveal to us. That our minds are blinded so we can't understand the books of Moses. Yah wants to remove those blinds, which is removed in Messiah, so we can read this ancient covenant and understand who he is, not toss it out. So when we says that we're in a new covenant, it's renewing the covenant and removing the elements that are fulfilled in Messiah. It's not removing the whole book, it's removing the specific covenant that was made with them at Mount Sinai, which is the covenant that was given to the Levites, not the instruction to the children of Israel. So I hope that this was clear. If there's any type of confusion or question, please feel free to send us. We'll be happy to answer in a video, and or respond respond back in an email. So if you have any questions, please feel free. Do not hesitate. Look forward to having a study with you next time. Shalom, everyone. Shalom, shalom. Thank you guys for joining our study today. I hope that it was edifying. And if you want to support this ministry, you can support us on 4alc.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube page. Click the like button and the notification bell. I hope to see you guys on the next study. Shalom, guys.